We're not on the basis, basically a working class population. Now that may create its own problem.
So you have an elite Muslim immigration.
More highly educated because of the nature of American law. American law favored those with education, those with occupational skills. So, for example, in the blowing up of the World Trade Centers, there was this figure, everyone had figures of 3,000 dead. Well, 200 of them were Muslims, or 150.
Working in trade and banking.
They weren't working as janitors. They were bond traders and so on. And true, they're Muslims, but they adapt more. They are open to more influences and so on. So in a way, and your Muslim population is in higher proportion drawn directly from peasant communities, from traditional communities, and so on. So there's that kind of distinction which I think is playing a role, or will play a role. And this is a difficult problem. One can see its difficulty from all the attention that's being given to it, and just how do you address it? And one of the things that is always discussed is how much accommodation do you make to cultural difference? And if you have very strong egalitarian traditions, equal treatment of boys and girls, for example, you may have strong legal basis for this. Or if you have, as you do in France, a very strong secular tradition, laical tradition in public education, it becomes an issue. It needn't have become an issue. It becomes an issue. There are now half dozen books on it, great discussion of what happens when Muslim girls wear a scarf to school. Is it a religious element, or what is it, and what are we going to do about it? It became a great issue. Now, by the way, it can become an issue in other countries too for other reasons. You believe in school uniforms or something.
So we have two continents, or two societies facing the same challenge: increased migration, increased cultural, ethnic, whatever have you, religious diversity within their own societies, and needing to cope with these things. Yes. Do you see United States and Europe pursuing two different models here, and are they in conflict with each other? And do you foresee an increased European-American divide because of these things?
Now there are Europe-American divides, but I don't see them based on this so much. Here I think there really is a great deal of commonality in how the issues are approached. I think one area of a divide, or one area which leads to at least a difference, is and this is much discussed, is the greater development of social welfare programs in Europe. Now,
and these very highly developed programs of welfare will not, as I understand, is a problem. You mentioned it before when it comes to integration of large groups.
It may. Let me say it becomes a political problem more than another kind. First of all, it may become a cultural problem in terms of these programs have a history of a complex historical development together with the development of population and attitudes. And so, for example, one hears from even perfectly rational people stories of the exploitation of these programs. If you come into them directly anew, and it means that for each child you get X amount of money, you might say, well, that'll be enough for me,
So what you're saying basically is that the European models, because there are several of them, are less apt and less efficient in dealing with rapid with migration, with diversity, and that the Americans are at an advantage here.
I think they are somewhat an advantage, but I was thinking more of political consequences. The political consequences are that in the United States we feel it's a more individualistic country, and people are more on their own, and they sink or swim. I mean, again, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but more or less. And so the upwardly mobile immigrant is applauded, and this is great. There's stories, they're opening businesses, they're doing this, they're doing that. In Europe, one hears it, because of the highly developed welfare programs, one begins to persist a sort of strain. These programs developed for countries that had a sense of, what shall I say, ethnic national commonality. We're all in this together. Many of these programs were done in order to strengthen the nation. That's why we have child support programs, and that's why it's a kind of nation-building kind of effort, the social welfare programs. Now, when you have groups coming in that are felt to be, to sentiment, rather different from the nation, if you have groups trying to exploit the notion that these people exploit the programs, one sees more in the way of potential political problems. Now,
do you think the European Union has a project, which is a project partially to accommodate, to deal with these trans-border migrations, borderless economy, will fail or succeed? Do you think it has a chance?
Well, all I can say is that it's going to have problems. The American papers recently had the story about the people in Goa, a former British colony of Portugal and India, who have the right to claim Portuguese citizenship, and they are now doing it primarily in order to then migrate from Portugal to England because of the common borderless society. So, one sees, now I'm not erecting these into monumental differences, but I think that one sees a strain in how to manage it, and that there will be strains in managing it, and so one sees these rapid rise, sudden explosions of anti-immigrant parties in Denmark, in the Netherlands, in France, and these are accompanied by variously, depends, they can be more positive, more negative, but with a some degree of racism, and they're creating problems.
And you don't foresee that the American model, as we have seen it so far, will run into problems of keeping a working society because it's innately individualistic, consumeristic character.
The Americans run into their own kinds of problems. After all, in the 1920s, were on the basis of very strong racist, ethno-nationalist feelings, we more or less cut off much of immigration. Now, I don't think that will happen. I mean, we'll have other problems because we assimilate immigrants so rapidly politically that anti-immigrant political sentiment is very muted and cannot really find a political base. If the Republicans want to attract the Hispanic voters because they feel too many now voting for the Democrats, they're going to moderate their anti-immigrant sentiments.
But there are anti-immigrant sentiments.
Let me say, sentiment is high. If you ask Americans, too many immigrants. But political expression is very muted and weak because of our basic two-party system and the attractions of both and the difficulty of having a third party.
In an economic downturn, do you think that could be exploited and exploded?
In a downturn, people will try to exploit it, and things will happen. We will have some kind of degree of restrictiveness, but that degree of restrictiveness is going to be limited because of the rapid political incorporation of new immigrants. Asian immigrants, Hispanic immigrants, etc. And strangely enough, because of a complicated history, blacks who might well feel they're being hurt by immigrants because there's a certain amount of competition sort of join the pro-immigrant lobby because that's the liberal thing to do. And so how can they be anti-immigrant? So in a way, what you have is a political situation in which, now you might say it's dangerous because there's a lot of sentiment. No, there's still a feeling, but the country is changing so fast the sentiment might be going, but there's still a feeling there are these other people coming.
Right.
Americans like all other people.
And of course the world is changing pretty fast too. We don't know what will be next year and what the American economy will be like and what the world will be like.
Yes.
Lena Glazer, good to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.